What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be talking about evaluating Steelers offensive coordinator Arthur Smith's tenure to this point. Would definitely like to give a shout out to a couple of my YouTube channel members that brought this topic to my attention. These guys wanted to get my opinion on whether this guy was any good or not, given the sample size that we now have in the Steel City. If you guys are like long-term subscribers, you probably remember that I did quite a bit of research that led to a bunch of content that I put out relative to Arthur Smith's scheme after he was hired last offseason. And my general takeaway from that was this: that I thought that Smith was a competent offensive coordinator, definitely a step up from the Matt Canada disaster that went on for far too long here. But my main question was, like, how is this guy going to evolve now that he's back in this role after things didn't go well in Atlanta with the head coaching duties and the play calling on top of that? And just how the NFL has just massively changed really since he had that really nice run of success in Tennessee years ago. Helping Ryan Tannehill, AJ Brown, Derrick Henry, that run game, all those things. Make a run in the playoffs. With Mike Vrabel at the helm. So today, what we're going to talk through is just positives, negatives, adding some important context to the situation to explain, what I think should happen moving forward beyond 2025. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm not saying the season's over. The Steelers play Baltimore on Sunday. We are going to preview the game. I'm still really jacked up for AFC North football. But having said that, I do think that just with the way that the season has been trending, with the Steelers kind of tailing off for the past month and a half, I do think it's reasonable to start looking ahead a little bit, just because of how things have started to unfold. But just before we get started, if you guys could do me a favor, like, subscribe, drop me a comment. All that stuff is greatly appreciated. Help support my work. Thank you guys for the continued support. So just kind of looking at some of the numbers for Smith's offense to this point through the first, 13 weeks of the season or whatever. The Steelers are 17th in EPA per play. They're 18th in success rate. They're 19th in points per drive. They have run the fewest offensive plays in the NFL, though. Some of that is like them struggling to sustain drives. They've had their fair share of three and outs. The defense as a whole has not been able to get off of the field. We saw that a little bit against Buffalo, kind of the both sides of that, how the Bills actually controlled time of possession for 42 minutes in that game, which is just absurd. You hardly ever see that at the professional level. But, when you look at it, it has, over the course of the season, it has largely been like an average-ish, average to below average-ish offense to date. The Steelers are only committing $91 million to the salary cap to the offensive side of the football this year. That's actually the fourth least in the NFL, and that's because they have the most expensive defense. And I think that the general consensus that I get from the fan base, just being on social media, reading through like my YouTube comments, things of that nature, is that I feel a lot more heat going in the direction of Terrell Austin and even Mike Tomlin rather than like Arthur Smith. And I do actually agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly, because regardless of what you think of the Steelers personnel defensively, it is very clear that they look very old because they are on defense. They still have way more talent on the defensive side of the ball than they do on the offensive side of the ball. And I just think at this point, it's fair to say that the offense has outperformed the defense for the majority of the season. It hasn't been perfect for either side of the ball. They've rarely played complementary football, and that's why they're in the situation that they're in right now at 6-6. So I definitely think that in terms of like coaching, where the fingers should be pointed, I definitely agree with where people's heads are at. A couple of things I have liked about the scheme, really focusing on this season. The scheme is very offensive line friendly. And I say this quite often, but, they have the second lowest pressure rate allowed this season on pass plays that take over 2.5 seconds. So that's excluding like all of the screens, all of the Rodgers like point guard quick game stuff that they do, which is it's a lot of the offense, to be clear. But I don't think that there are very many schemes in the NFL that are easier to play in from an offensive line standpoint. And I think that's why you've been able to see some of the young guys take nice steps forward in their development this season in particular. Like, I think Zach Frazier's had a solid year. I think that Mason McCormick's taken a step forward. And I think that Troy Fautanu been about as advertised, at least from a pass protection standpoint. And I actually think over the past month or so, like Isaac Seumalo is probably playing his best ball, maybe of his career, but definitely of his like Steelers tenure too. So, this is one of those systems where like I don't think that Broderick Jones could go play in very many offenses around the league over the last couple of years and like be like a viable starter at tackle. Just because the lack of like the drop back exposure and things of that nature, it really helps protect a guy like him. He's put together some really nice game plans too. I think back to specifically to the Cleveland game where they were able to minimize Myles Garrett. If you guys have been paying attention to the NFL in any sort of capacity, you're probably aware that that dude is probably going to break the NFL sack record. And the fact that like he was a total non-factor in that game is credit to really good coaching. Not to take anything away from Broderick, because I thought that he had a couple of nice individual reps, but it was really devoting a lot of attention to take away the pass rush. And they've been doing that all season long. Rodgers is one of the least pressured quarterbacks in the league. So I think from an offensive line standpoint, there are definitely advantages to playing under Arthur Smith. Dating back to the offseason, I think even last year, I was clamoring for like more run game diversity. And I think that Art has done a better job this year, like mixing in more gap scheme runs specifically, runs with pullers. Like if you look at some of the numbers, and it's still not a ton of attempts, I would definitely advocate for more gap, more power, more counter, things of that nature. But they've been effective when they've put them in, at least as a changeup. Like this season, they're averaging 6.2 yards per carry on a little bit over 50 attempts when they've actually pulled offensive linemen. And I look at that, and the reason why I say that I would personally like to see a continued uptick in that is they're running more from the gun, and I do think that that's a good way to kind of diversify your gun run approach, because when you're in the gun, like it's pretty easy to tell like what gap the ball is going to mostly be going to, what direction at least, and pullers can help alleviate some of that. I think some of the motion stuff in the run game has been good, and they found like some nice solutions in terms of other game plans that I've liked specifically. I think back to the Vikings game where they got really heavy against the Vikings, who are really light up front. They like to play with light boxes. They got light interior defensive tackles. They put Spencer Anderson on the field, and really over the first like half of the season, the Spencer Anderson thing was way more than a gimmick. Like at one point in the season, I think we talked about in the preview one week, like they were averaging like 7 yards per carry. Now those numbers recently have definitely died down, and I think that just that's just how the NFL is. Like you put something on tape week after week after week. Teams adjust and things like that, but you got to continually find creative solutions. And I think that that at least early in the season was a reason that they were able to have a little bit more success offensively, and that those ideas were cool. I think he's definitely not the first person to use 6 offensive linemen. Buffalo was doing that last year, but taking advantage of all the arrows in the quiver, as you could say, is a good idea for sure. I think I've always been really transparent about how I feel about. I think he's deserving of credit, probably more credit than he gets in terms of managing two like really established quarterbacks with very big egos, and Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, and encouraging those guys, perhaps maybe too much at times, to play their brand of ball. Like with Russ, it was taking a bunch of deep shots down the sideline like a half dozen times per game. That's really never been Arthur Smith's offense. Like you look back to his stops in Atlanta or Tennessee, it's just not what he's done. And the fact that he was able to allow Russ to do that because that's really all he could do, I mean, to a certain extent, that's good coaching, right? And I think with Rodgers, it's been the freedom at the line of scrimmage to take his time, change plays, do those things, and the insane amount of quick game concepts that he's used, even dating back to his days in Green Bay, bringing over some of the things that he's really comfortable with. I mean, that's how the league is. Like you got to be able to have that good relationship with the quarterback, and I have no reason to think that like that's anything but that with Art at the helm. So. And then I just think that also it's like I'm trying to add context to the conversation, because I do have a lot of complaints. Like I'm sure like a lot of you guys probably have as well. But I do think it's fair to acknowledge that just like the quarterback play is just it's not been up to the standard that I feel like you really want for the NFL. When you aim low at this position and you sign a guy, like you wait until the summer to sign a guy that really, like Pittsburgh was Rodgers' only suitor this year to play football. Just how things ended in Green Bay. His last season there wasn't good. Last year with the Jets, like also like wasn't good. Played a little bit better down the stretch. But I think that like, best case scenario is that like Rodgers was going to be like a baseline starter for you this year. And like over the first half of the season, I think that he probably played a little bit above that. I would say over the past like month and some change, like he's been below that. And that's kind of another reason that the offensive metrics have kind of fallen off over the past 5 or 6 weeks. It's probably another reason why their records fallen off over the past 6 weeks. And I think that, you know, you could say what you want. Like, it doesn't really, I don't want to say it doesn't matter who the offensive coordinator is, because it does, but I'm not trying to give him a pass completely necessarily. But I do just think that, like, there are just certain things that Rodgers can't do at this stage of his career, even if, like, he still has the quick release and can still beat people with his mind and, like, the quick game stuff. He can do all that stuff. There's just certain things like he just physically cannot do. And I think the biggest thing with that is, like, he just cannot deal with pressure anymore at this stage of his career. Like, he hasn't been able to do it for several years, but, like, one of the more insane stats that I've looked up this entire season was he's been pressured on 77 dropbacks this year. He's taken more sacks, 20, than he has completions, 19. He hasn't completed a pass in over a month while he's been under pressure. Like, not even like a check down. He has not completed a pass. So he really can't move, can't create the way that he once was able to. Obviously, not even like in his prime, but even like 4 or 5 years ago, during like the LaFleur relationship in Green Bay. So it's tough to work around. I do think that I said, when they made this marriage happen, that I thought that his weaknesses were easier to work around than Russ's weaknesses. And I think to an extent that has been true. I never said it was going to be easy. And I think it's proven that, like, it's not easy. And really, how this is all unfolding should not be a surprise, really, to anyone if you've paid attention or watched how, like, what the tape has been over the past several years. So that's just not giving him a pass for it. But just that's just the reality, the situation, the context surrounding that he's been working with. But get to some of, like, my complaints, and like I said, I have quite a few. Back-to-back seasons where they've ranked 29th in the NFL in yards per pass off play action. The allure of bringing Art here was that the run game was gonna be the focus of the offense. They were gonna win with their bigs up front. And then off of that, they were going to be able to provide enough in the aerial attack via play action. And a big reason why they're 25th in explosive play rate this year is that they just don't have a quarterback that can operate a robust kind of pure drop back passing game. The quarterback can't create those second reaction plays out of the pocket. So then you're really entirely dependent on your guys underneath breaking a ton of tackles. And as we've seen over the past month and some change, like, that's just not a sustainable way to live over the course of the entire season. But I don't think Arthur's done a good job designing things up in the play action passing game. There's been a lot of times where, it's been really simplistic, like bootleg 3-level concepts where it's like, it's a lot of condensed splits. You get the one guy to the corner, you got the one guy on the over, and then you got somebody in the flat. Those are not creative designs by any stretch of the imagination. Everyone runs those, but, like, even how the Steelers have been dressing those up, the sequencing of those plays hasn't been great, hasn't been springing guys free. And then there just hasn't been enough in, like, the pure, like, 7-step drop or play action passing game. I'm even thinking about, like, simple concepts that Aaron has used in the past. And I don't know, like, could Aaron be just going to Art and saying, like, I just don't want to do this stuff? If so, that is up to the coordinator. Like, you have to sometimes, there's a happy medium that you have to have in terms of playing to your quarterback's strengths and what he's comfortable with, and also, like, being willing to, like, push them in a direction to help them evolve and get better as well. Like, that's part of coaching as well. And, like, I'm not saying that you have to do it at a top 10 rate in the NFL, because I understand, like, that's not how the quarterback wants to play either. But could you do the occasional, like, can we fake and run a drift concept, which is like, we're going to fake mid zone or inside zone under center, and then we're going to throw, like, a little glance route over the middle, take advantage of the aggressiveness of the second level defenders. If you don't want to throw over the middle, because I know that, like, Rodgers' numbers and, like, percentage of throws thrown over the middle has declined as he's gotten older because he doesn't want to turn the ball over. You can still do other things in terms of, like, can we get some play action 7-step drop and throw a comeback to the outside? Like, could we throw, like, a deep bench route, like some type of, like, 15, 18-yard outbreaker, and develop that timing and trust with the wide receivers over the course of the season? And, that was always going to be like a thing that was going to have to be developed in real time. And I understand that that's not easy either with all the newness to the parties at play. But they just haven't even tried, to be honest with you. And I just think that that's been a real detriment to the evolution in the passing game, in my opinion. It's the slimmest number of concepts in the passing game that you'll see in the NFL. If you look around at the tape at other teams, I would really encourage you, go get yourself an NFL Pro subscription. Go watch some of the best offenses in the league, and then compare it to how this offense functions. It's just night and day different. And I also wouldn't say that they do enough, like, what I would classify as, like, designer plays and, like, specific play calls tailored for a certain coverage that you feel like you're going to get on a certain down, so third down, or a specific area in the field, like a high red zone, we think we're going to get this and we're going to call this. Plays that build off certain concepts that you put on tape in previous weeks that defensive coordinators are showing in the meeting rooms, and then showing their guys like, this is how we're going to play this. This is what you should expect. And then kind of throwing a curveball off of that. Or, and this is just like the most general way that I can put it, just putting your best players in areas of the field where they work the best. And I think that that kind of gets me into some of the personnel complaints that I have specifically with Art. And this to me is the most frustrating because I think that it just shouldn't really be a conversation at the NFL level. DK, he's on pace right now for his career low in terms of receiving yards this season after the Steelers just made him one of the highest paid players at his position. And he's your most exposed to playmaker. So far this season, DK Metcalf has 3 receptions on deep targets, 3 all year long, over 20 air yards. During his time in Seattle had multiple different offensive coordinators, some of which aren't even in the NFL right now, guys that would not get other looks either, such as Ryan Grubb. During those seasons that he was in as a Seahawk, he averaged 12 explosive pass receptions over 20 air yards per season. Now, have teams made clever adjustments, bracketing him, having a corner crowd his space at the line of scrimmage, play inside leverage, use a safety over the top, play some in and out stuff when it's necessary to make sure that they take him out of the game? Yes, that's good defensive coaching. Kudos to those guys. I would even go as far to agree with the people that would say, like, maybe DK is not living up to the contract or he's not playing up to his potential. I've said multiple times this year, especially on the podcast that we do weekly, that I don't think that DK is separating at the same level that he has been in previous seasons, especially against Seattle. He was destroying press. He has not done that this year, in my opinion. But having said that, this is where, like, you need your offensive coordinator come in and make life a little bit easier, even if it's on your best players. You got to move them into the slot a little bit more. Maybe it's less isolation reps on the boundary and, putting him in some more bunch formations, maybe to get him a clean release off the line of scrimmage, make it more difficult for teams to double team him and get him some more opportunities to make an impact for you offensively. I've said this multiple times about the Steelers coaching staff, and it's really mostly been relative to like TJ Watt and how teams have taken him away in recent seasons. As a staff, you can't be content with allowing the opposing team to just take away your best players and say, okay, they're taking 2 guys or more resources to take away my best player. We'll live with that. Okay. Like, I don't believe in that as a philosophy. Now, to me, it looks like that they do, and have believed in that's okay over the past couple of years because of the lack of adjustments that they've had. But if you are going to go down that route, I think that you've got to be, hyper alert about getting your supporting cast members opportunistic chances. And this is why I get so frustrated, is like simply identifying who your best players are on the roster and the personnel deployment of those guys, to me, should be one of the more easier aspects of coaching, like game planning, figuring out a way to like outsmart how many clever defensive coordinators we've got in the league right now. That's difficult, right? Like, I understand that. But I don't see other organizations struggle in this regard like the Steelers do, especially on offense. And that really does boil down to Arthur Smith, in my opinion. Last year, Pat Freiermuth was 9th in EPA per target among tight ends, playing with a quarterback who literally could not see over the offensive line. And if you actually run the tape back on a weekly basis, you will see, I mean, at least I could have a full folder saved on my MacBook. There were multiple times per game that the quarterback would turn down opportunities to get the ball to 88. And he was still productive when he was given the chances, right? 9th in EPA per target. Even this year, right? Playing with Aaron Rodgers, he's 11th in that same statistic among tight ends. For the record, let me be very clear when I say this. I have no desire to take Darnell Washington off the field. He's honestly been one of the bright spots, not just like of the Steelers, but of the entire NFL. Watching him play football is one of the most enjoyable aspects of my job. You can feel free to critique Pat Freiermuth's blocking reps or the technique or anything like that. I understand it. I get it. I agree with you to an extent as an inline player. But you cannot deny that since he's been a part of this organization, that good things happen when he gets the football. And that's what's so frustrating. Like, you go back to the Bears game. Mason Rudolph in at quarterback. They're going down to try to I think it's tie the game in late in the fourth quarter. To get that drive started, they put Fryermuth in the slot. They have him run a choice route up against a safety. I can't remember if it's Brisker or Byard, whichever one. Doesn't matter. Easily crosses his face, gets open towards the middle of the field. It's like a 15-ish yard gain run after catch, right? It's a good drive starter. Boom, you get yourself completion. You get a little bit momentum. Where has that been all season long? You are struggling for answers in the passing game. You are dying for someone to take pressure off of your number one wide receiver. The next week, why is he getting 17 snaps a game? I don't understand it. Someone's going to have to make sense of it. To me, I refuse to believe that there is not a place for him to be utilized in this offense to where he can make an impact, because it would be one thing if when he's getting on the field, the snaps that he's getting, he's just getting clamped up or he's been an active detriment to the cause. I would totally understand that. But that's not what's happening. And what's even more frustrating, and to compound that frustration, is that the player that is playing over him in the lineup is one of Art's you know, guys from two previous stops that has been a detriment to their causes. And that to me just makes no sense. It's blind loyalty that is actively hurting the team. Johnny Smith can be a useful player with the ball in his hands on screens and things of that nature, but he is dead last in yards per route run this season among qualifying tight ends. He has not shown the ability to separate versus man coverage. He has been the second worst blocker that I've scouted this year at the tight end position. And a good example of coaching malpractice in my opinion is that they are asking him to perform assignments that he is just simply not capable of executing. And that is on coaching. For example, it's 2 scores, I think, in the fourth quarter of the Bills game. They get down, and it's 4th and 2 or something like that. They're running duo. They have Spencer Anderson and Darnell Washington both in the game. Spencer Anderson is lined up as more of the F. He's off the ball. He's actually in a wide receiver stance, which is hilarious. Jonnu Smith is goes in motion. He's in the backfield as a fullback. He's going out to the flat, acting like he's going to run an RPO. Or excuse me, that's Darnell Washington. Jonnu Smith is in line as the Y tight end on the ball, and he's got his feet up correct and all this different stuff. They are asking him to wash down Greg Rousseau, who is a bigger, heavy defensive end, on duo, one-on-one, in a gotta-have-it situation. We've got to convert this down and get into the end zone and get the 2-point conversion to stay alive in this game. There is no do-overs. You got to have it. That's what they're asking him to do. People are asking on social media, why is his production down? Things of that nature. One, I think you just got to understand that last year, his production was skyrocketed. He played well. Mike McDaniel did a excellent job designing plays to get the ball in his hands and in space. From a schematic standpoint, he's just done a better job of maximizing maximizing Jonnu than Art has over the years. And I think that is an indictment of Arthur Smith. And it's also an example of how Miami was just willing to live with some of the stuff that some of the tendencies that you accrue over the course of the season with Jonnu as a player when you don't ask. They just didn't ask him to block. The Steelers are asking him to block. The Dolphins were we're not going to ask him to block when he's in the game. We're going to run away from him, or we're just going to throw the ball. We don't care if the defense knows. We just think that this is the best offense that we can generate this season. That's fine. That's their decision. That's the route that they made. But the Steelers don't have to do what they've done for the first 13 weeks of the season. They should have abandoned this plan of attack weeks and weeks ago, but they haven't. And going back to that 4th down play, who's the tailback on that play? It's Kenneth Gainwell. And Gainwell's done some nice things. He's definitely been better than I anticipated when he signed over the summer. Why is that not Jaylen Warren? Why is Jaylen Warren only getting 34% of the offensive touches in this offense when he's been clearly, to anyone with a working set of eyes, that he's been their best player this year? He is 5th this year in yards after contact generated per touch. He is up there. The guys in front of him are your Bijan Robinsons, your Jonathan Taylors, true workhorse type backs. I'm not saying that you have to go revert back to the circa 2016 Steelers and it's Le'Veon Bell and he's got to go get 96% of the snaps or anything of that nature. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there are significant stretches of games key periods, I might add, gotta have it situations where they just forget about him, man. They just act like he's not on the team, or they strictly confine him to one specific role, like he can't play third downs, or like he can't be in like goal line situations, or we get too pass heavy at times and we don't give him the touches that he needs. Like for an offense that's been searching for answers, like for them not to make him the centerpiece of this thing is just baffling to me, especially after you just gave him the contract extension. Like you would think that he would be a player, and like I would understand it from like a you don't want to overload the guy and everything. Like that stuff sounds good when you're 4-1, that you don't want to like overwork somebody. You want to save them down the stretch. When you're 6-6, man, or 6-5, and like you're on the brink of losing, 4 out of your last six or 5 out of your last 7 or whatever it may be, you got to start thinking like players, not plays in those types of situations. That's coaching, for me. So, I think the question that I think you have to ask, the Steelers had to ask themselves as an organization is like, is this the guy that you want to develop whatever quarterback that they hopefully select in April's NFL draft? Whether it's, you're probably going to have to be aggressive, Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore, Ty Simpson, Lenora Sellers, whoever it is, I don't care. You know, is this the right guy, like the right person to, put with that player? I just don't know what you could really point to in terms of like his scheme, because like the stuff that the Steelers have had success with in the passing game over the past 2 years has been Russ deep balls and Rodgers just doing like the quick game underneath passing stuff. Those aren't like schematic values from Arthur Smith. Those are just qualities that those guys kind of brought to Pittsburgh. And while he deserves credit for allowing them to do what they do best, he hasn't like elevated or restored any type of like other value to those guys' game. And there's also not really a track record of him developing quarterbacks really since he left Tennessee. Like him and Tannehill had a great relationship, and maybe that's just the type of stylistic player that he needs specifically to elevate the scheme. But I went back to like the play action stuff. It's just not been good. Like even dating back to Atlanta, it hasn't been good enough. So I think teams have just gotten more and more film and kind of have understood like the things that he likes to do on offense and done a better job of taking those things away. And I think that's where my hang up kind of lies, is like, what are the additive qualities that you can point to that like he obviously possesses to where you're like really excited about him being the guy in charge of this? And I've talked about this for years and years and years now, but I think the two most important people within your organization, the quarterback and whoever's calling your offensive plays, right? You can follow that up by saying like the head coach and the general manager, whatever order you want to use. But in my opinion, like those guys are the pillars, the foundational pillars of a franchise, right? So with those positions specifically, I'm not trying to shoot for a high floor. And I do recognize that like Arthur Smith has brought like a level of respectability back to the offensive side of football for the Steelers. And I get that for sure. It's just for me, I want a ceiling worth pursuing. Like I'm not aiming low at these spots. I'll kind of reference a study that I wrote about a couple years ago, and I kind of keep track of this like every single season. But since 2018, every team that's actually made the conference championship game in the AFC and NFC has been top 10 in offensive EPA per play, except two. It was like the 2021 Bengals, they were 11th, and I think the 2023 Chiefs, maybe they were 11th as well. So it's like that's the caliber of offense that you have to be able to generate if you have intentions on contending and like getting to your final destination. I think I speak for, however many, like, we're thankfully finally over that like 10,000 sub mark. I think I speak for a lot of you guys, hopefully, that are watching this video, is like, I would love to see the Steelers get back to playing like meaningful football, right? Like I want to play meaningful games in January. Like I don't want to see the Steelers like, backdoor themselves into a wild card spot or the playoffs and then like get drummed in the wild card round by some alien quarterback because they don't have the capability of like, getting into some type of shootout. Like that's just not what I'm trying to like pursue. Like I want to get back to trying to win Super Bowls. That is the goal. The goal is not to win 9, 10 games every year. The goal is to build a Super Bowl team. And I recognize that that's difficult, but I would say that a lot of the Steelers' issues from an organizational standpoint kind of can come back to lead to them aiming low with some of these hires and some of these choices, like going with some safe plays at quarterback, like drafting what you perceive as like a high floor prospect and older high floor prospect in Kenny Pickett, which like that turned out, worse than probably than they imagined, or like going the cheap route with like guys like Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. You traded day 3 pick for Justin Fields, and then like even with the coaching hires, like they're not taking like big swings. Like a lot, Mike Tomlin's remained the head coach was, I would imagine that that's probably not going to change unless he wants it to in the future. But I think with the offensive coordinator spot, like for me to summarize the whole thing, I think again been about what I expected after he was hired. I think he's been fine. I definitely have a respect for him. I think Art's a good dude. I don't think that retaining him for another season, if that's the route that they go, is some catastrophic decision necessarily. It's not something that I'm gonna like just clown or just persecute the organization for doing. It's just personally, I would like to see them aim a little bit higher, go with something that potentially has a little bit more upside, and I'd be willing to cast a really wide net to find whatever solution that is, especially knowing that you're going to have to take another swing at the quarterback position very soon. Hopefully they're able to do so in the offseason, but we'll see what that looks like. But we'll see how the season ends. Hopefully they turn things around. And if they do, obviously some of the things I talked about with, negatives, things that I've critiqued on with Art, like if he improves those things, I reserve the right to, give him credit for that, and I'll change my mind. But that's just where my head's at right now. We'll see how these next 5, maybe 6, hopefully more weeks kind of go as we play on. But just as a reminder, if you guys want more content from me, I know this video like went a lot longer than I was anticipating going. But if you guys want like more content from me, consider becoming a member to the channel. It's $4 a month, no long-term commitment, anything like that. But John Ledyard and I do the Yins No Ball podcast on a weekly basis. Those podcasts are like well over an hour long of like rants, rambles, things probably that very similar to this, as maybe some of the channel members would vouch for in the comments, where we're talking, X's and O's, schematic approach, coaching decision, team building philosophies, the NFL in general, specific film observations, things of that nature that I think a lot of you guys would probably like. The link of that is going to be in the description. Also writing some stuff about for Steelers Now. I'm going to try to record a film room on Oregon quarterback Dante Moore at some point. I've got the film cut up, mostly done. I've just got to like record it and get the editing done and everything. Probably won't get to that today, but like maybe tomorrow or something like that. That'll be up for channel members. So if you guys are looking for more content, I got y'all. Otherwise, I will see you guys probably early on Saturday for the Steelers Ravens preview. I'm really excited about that. I will check you guys very soon. Peace and love.